the Banjoverse with me, your host, Enda Scahill. On this episode, I talked to singer-songwriter Emma Langford from Limerick in Ireland. Emma is endlessly eloquent and elegant, a remarkable singer-songwriter, and a wonderful social advocate as well. I do hope that you enjoy this interview with Emma Langford.
On the winding way down.
So how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just home from the gym. And you know the rule, if someone goes to the gym, they have to tell you. So I'm just home from the gym. I'm doing weight training for the past couple of years. And I hit a PB of, I think I deadlifted 100 kg there a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And now we're doing, what's it called? Back offs? Loads, somethings? I don't know. There's something you do in the weeks following like a big weight like that, where you just like a deload, a few weeks deload, where you just kind of do low weights for lots of reps. So your body doesn't freak out about you doing too much weight all the time.
You're obviously doing this with a trainer then.
Yes. Yeah. It's a silly little thing, but like when I started my career, one of my goals had always been to, because I was always so jealous of like, you know, famous people always like looking in top shape and like being on top of things. So all I ever wanted was to have a personal trainer and a nutritionist. And I worked with a nutrition coach for a few months last year, which really, really helped. And now I'm kind of on the right track and I know how to fuel myself and look after myself and not feel like rubbish all the time. And then Rob, my trainer, is someone I've been working with for a couple of years because I was actually experiencing like really chronic back pain to the point that I was stuck in bed for days at a time there a couple of years ago. And all the advice I got was to do weight training. And I thought it sounded ridiculous because I was like, my back is constantly sore. How can I possibly lift heavy things? But just find the right person and take it at your pace. And once they understand what your priorities are and stuff, it kind of really works. So now I have achieved that silly little goal I had for so long of just having a PT and having a nutrition coach. Now, I don't work with Tasha at the moment on nutrition because I hit a point where I was like, I'm becoming obsessed with this. And that's not what I want. I don't want to be, you know, my goal was never weight loss or anything. And we had kind of started working toward that. And I was like, you know what? I need to step back now for a while and not do this. And she was great about it. So that's me. How are you?
I'm fine. I could do it going to the gym. I do weight training a lot. And I haven't been since before Christmas, just because it's the time of year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's my excuse and I'm sticking to it anyway.
Well, I mean, I think it's something most musicians should do a bit of because of the amount of kind of held positions we have on stage and the sitting in cars and all. Like a lot of the stuff we do day to day with touring and playing and setting up and all this is actually quite strenuous on your body if your muscles are not prepared for it. So it's something that I think, you know, whether you have chronic back pain or whatever your kind of, you know, aesthetic goals might be, weight training is so good for you.
Yeah. I love it for the release and the head. It's so good for the head going.
It really is.
I used to listen to Tony Robbins quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
What take him or leave him, but he used to say, you know, if you're in a funk, just go and lift something heavy, and you'll feel better afterwards. And I always found that worked. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like therapy. Like twice a week, I go into this room and all I have to think about is lifting this thing up and putting it back down. And now, granted, myself and my trainer, we're both kind of nerds. So we wind up having all kinds of mad, meandering chats. But, you know, the goal of these hours is not to impress anyone or do anything other than literally pick this thing up and put it back down or support your own body weight hanging from this thing. Or, you know, it's very nice to have this real streamlined focus for 2 hours of the week. It's as good as therapy, like, and also therapy would also be good.
So do you do, are you into the cold water stuff?
I am. I'm really bad at, that's the wrong mentality, but I am bad at it. Like I hate being cold. And I don't have the equipment for it at the moment. So like I need to get proper like long sleeve togs thing and the proper hat and the boots and everything. And then I think I will be more willing to go for it. It's just, it gets into my bones and then I really struggle to warm up after it. And I'm always a little bit afraid that it'll make me sick. And then that affects up my week for work as well. So yeah, I love it anyway. I think it's great. Yeah,
I did it once.
You really? You can't handle it.
Complete once with the cold. But like that, I got so cold that like 4 hours later, I was still cold. And, you know, they talk about the buzz of when you warm up. And I was like, when is this going to kick in? Because I'm just terrified that I'm never going to be warm again.
Yeah, when does that part happen?
It was too much for me.
It's every time I do it, that is kind of my experience, that it takes a while to warm up. So I've now got a dry robe. I'm a dry robe person, which any listeners to your podcast or viewers of your podcast who have an issue with dry robe people, I'm sorry, but it's really cozy.
If you have an issue with dry robe people, you want to go and get an issue for yourself.
I know. I had this whole kind of chat on Twitter there a while back. It's like, I really wanted one. And I was like, okay, can someone please explain to me what the issue is? And I think the issue at the time was there was this like strata of people who had them, who weren't actually really into the cold water swimming. They just liked showing off that they could afford to buy a dry robe because they're so expensive as well. Like they're actually very expensive. So there was apparently this like strata of people who would just like hang out by the sea in their dry robes with their like iced mocha latte things or whatever. And it was like a whole like.
But that sounds totally made up by somebody who went, look at them, they don't even swim. Sure.
Yeah. Look, there's always going to be.
I mean, I'm trying to think of the amount of people that would actually put on a dry robe with no intention of ever swimming just so that they could say that they could afford a dry robe. It seems a little bit.
It seems like a stretch, all right. Yeah. But I guess, I mean, you know, you've got the kind of the people who hang out in active wear as well and carry a yoga mat around just to kind of be seen carrying a yoga mat around. You know, there's always going to be some. Anyway, there is some really cool research into the impact of cold water swimming. I think it's really, you know, it's really, really cool because I've seen the effects of it. I have friends who are on antidepressants and who swear by the serotonin rush of cold water swimming versus what they'll get out of, you know, the dopamine hit of getting into cold water and that full body experience. They come away, and there have been, you know, actual quantitative scientific studies into this as well, looking at how someone's serotonin spikes after a cold water swim versus the top dose of antidepressants. And so I would really love to be better at it for that reason of having something weekly that I do that has that kind of impact, you know?
Yeah. Oh, me too. I watch all the YouTube videos of Andrew Huberman and all of the science behind it. I'm like, yeah, it sounds awesome. Yeah. And then go down to Silver Strand and I'm like, it's very cold.
You know, I actually get the exact same rush from just watching you guys. So I'll just leave you to it.
I feel cold enough watching it. Yeah. All right, let's talk some music.
Sure.
So you're from Limerick.
Mm-hmm.
Have you, has it been, right, so I was 6 years old and got handed a tin whistle when I went to national school and the rest is history, as they say. What's your starting point?
I was a stage school kid. So I was doing cartwheels and cat stumbles and all that kind of stuff across the stage in clown costumes and wigs. I got a handful of solo singing roles in different kind of stage school shows, like variety shows, but it was always just like a hobby. Also, I was quite hyperactive as a child, you know. Now as an adult, I've learned that it's entirely likely I have ADHD. But at the time as a kid, I was just a chatterbox and a handful. And so my mom put me into every stage school, speech and drama, choirs, everything that she could find, because I was never happy. And then I'd get home and was still performing and I would still be putting on costumes and stuff. So that was kind of my start. It wasn't that I was, you know, buzzing to play an instrument or anything. I was writing poetry. I was always writing stories and writing poetry and stuff. And then when I hit my teens, I discovered music in a slightly more meaningful way, I suppose, as opposed to a way to just get the energy out of me. But it was kind of a tricky path because when I was about 12, I started to develop vocal nodules. So I lost my voice for a long time and I wasn't allowed to sing in every choir I had to mime. I dropped out of stage school. I just like kind of gave up on performing in music.
I'm trying to picture going to choir and miming.
Yeah, I know. I had some very, very patient choral directors. So two women in Limerick who anyone from Limerick will probably know if they work in music at all are Maura Kiri Scanlon and Orla Colgan. And Orla Colgan was my choral director in school, and Maura was the Limerick Youth Choir director. Two outstanding women they just knew how much I wanted to spend time with other singers and kids my age. And I guess they could see in me the kind of the urge to sing, but they when I explained to them what was happening, they were so accommodating, and they allowed me to kind of sing the bare minimum or just mime in parts. And I remember at one point then in the school choir, as my voice was kind of coming back, I had like a really good range because I had gone through all of this vocal therapy and vocal retraining with Moira. So then I got back to the school choir and started singing again, and my range was like insane from this vast amount of vocal rest and retraining, which was really, really cool. So yeah, I was about, I guess, 17 thereabouts when I was, throughout school I was listening to Avril Lavigne and Evanescence and all of these real kind of punk emo bands. Anything with a bit of drama to it, I guess, was always what drew me in. So all that punk emo stuff always had that, and I loved it, and it allowed me to be angsty as well, so that was great. And then toward the end of school I started writing my own music, and it kind of went from there. My mom handed me my first guitar, and I refused to play it. Like, I wouldn't touch it. It was because she played guitar when she was growing up, and I was like, no, it's not cool because my mom does it. And then eventually, I think it was junior cert. I wasn't very like I was a really clever kid, but the school system didn't suit me. I won't say I wasn't academic. I could have easily been academic, but the school system in Ireland just did not suit me at all. Couldn't ask enough questions in class. I wasn't allowed to engage the way I wanted to or learn how I wanted to. So junior cert rolled around, and I was expected to sit down and study stuff I didn't care about for hours at a time. And all of a sudden, miraculously, I had an interest in the guitar. So I went back to my mom, and I knew she would be all about this because it was her thing. So I was like, Mom, I just really want to like learn a few chords on the guitar. I want to learn to play this song. And she was just thrilled until she twigged exactly what I was doing. And at that point, it was too late. So that was kind of, I guess, the beginning of the end for me in a way.
So do you feel you missed out in any sense academically? Would a different road have opened up had you, been able to pursue different subjects in a different way? Because I'm
quite possibly
very familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I recently had the reason I know that ADHD is a likelihood for me is I recently got an autism diagnosis, and I don't like to call it a diagnosis. It feels very reductive and negative. An identification, and it opened up a lot of things for me, and it reframed a lot of my experiences growing up. So I really loved in school. I loved science. Like growing up, I loved science. I loved history. I really, really loved understanding how the world worked. And it's possibly part of why I was drawn to writing songs as well, is because when I'm writing, it's my processing kind of, it's how I see the world. And thankfully, it's through a creative lens. I'd have loved to have been able and to have been enabled to really pursue like physics or anything scientific in school. But, nobody has the time for the one kid who has a million questions, or who doesn't feel like the book communicated something clearly enough, or who isn't willing to just regurgitate what's in the book. And also I was learning through Irish. So I was in an all Irish speaking school, and there was that additional layer of complication for the teachers, for us. In history, we would sit there in class all day, every day, just transcribing our book into a copybook in Irish. The teacher would have it all translated, and we never had conversations or discussions in junior cert about, what actually happened or what was interesting about it. It was just, right, let's regurgitate this now. So yeah, I think had things been different in the way they were taught, I might have wound up in a different area or a different path. I'm slow to regret that because I am where I am because of it. But I always feel bad for that kid that felt useless because of the way things were.
That's fascinating. And I have some experience of that as well. Not the Irish. But yeah, it's a funny old school system that it very much fits the middle 60%. And
Yeah,
then the outliers on both ends. It's kind of like,
absolutely.
can you just kind of squeeze into the middle and be quiet and don't disrupt too much?
Oh, for sure. And then even at that 60% relies so heavily on people's parents having money for grinds and tutorials and all that supplementary work that, not everyone has. So that's, in most schools in Ireland, yeah, you'll have 60% that are thriving, but there's so many schools out there that don't have that kind of support, or, parents don't have that kind of financial backing to be able to do that. So it's loads of kids falling through the cracks. But I guess, for any parents that are struggling with that, or who have kids that are struggling with that, just to know that there are, like, I'd have loved to have known in school that there were alternative ways. Now, inherently, I believed this. Inherently, I believed the CAO was not the be all end all. The Leaving Cert was not the be all end all. I quite enjoyed my Leaving Cert year because I had come to a point of resignation of like, this is not going to suit me. This is not like I could make myself miserable studying every single hour of every single day to get the results I supposedly need in this exam, and wind up on some course that I don't really care about. So my CAO, I put down some ridiculous stuff. My top choice was the BA Voice and Dance in UL. And then under that, I put like midwifery or something. It was just like a string of like random things that I had zero interest in. And I was like, oh, they need me to fill this out, so I'll just fill it out. But it was with a very clear mind that if I don't get this course, I'll find another way to do something I want to do. I'm not going to accept any of these other courses. So, the school system is rubbish, and it should really be about education and about making education exciting. I think it's something, maybe you had this growing up as well, whenever I would find something boring or found, learning about something not very engaging, the default response was like, well, life isn't meant to be exciting. Life isn't meant to be fun. That was always the response, And I remember being really confused by that, because why not? Like, why can't things be made exciting and fun if that's what someone needs to engage and connect and participate? Obviously, yeah, agreed. Not everything is always going to be exciting and fun, but why not find it where you can? So, yeah, you'd always wonder kind of what would have happened otherwise, but life is what it is.
What was your poetry like when you were a kid?
Oh,
what was it about?
Um,
Was it all unicorns and rainbows?
No, God, no. I had a really macabre, dark sense of humor. I was very into Terry Pratchett and Roald Dahl and Quentin Blake, and who's an illustrator, but his illustrations kind of drew me in. So there was a competition at Eason in Limerick to win a big collection of Roald Dahl books. It was a poetry competition, and I entered it in the style of Roald Dahl. So I wrote this really weird, long poem about basically a little girl needing to go to the toilet, but there's a monster in the toilet, and so she can't go in there. And it turns out that the monster was just her sister wearing a face mask and cucumbers on her eyes and a towel on her head, kind of thing. But she gets spooked by it, and it's this whole thing, this big long saga about that kind of thing. So it was mostly that kind of stuff. A lot of I had quite a kind of a gruesome, dark sense of humor as a kid. So very rarely unicorns and ponies and things. As I got a little bit older, I would have tried to kind of copy the pop sort of style of songwriting and written sort of songs about going out dancing and stuff when I was like 10, and had no idea what any of it meant. Because I had an older sister who she had a band, all friends, and they would have come to the house and like practice their songs together and stuff. So I've been learning from them, and then Spice Girls would have been kind of around, and I'm just sort of absorbing all of that. But yeah, no, my childhood poetry was not what you'd expect from a kid.
So was it a musical or creative house then? You said your mum played guitar.
Yeah, my parents are they both studied science in college. They both studied science in UCC. That's where they met. And but they're both artists. My dad's a cartoonist, and my mom would be more into kind of like landscapes and portraits and stuff. So they own a family business where they do like murals and window painting and Santa's cabins and kids' bedrooms, that kind of thing. So that was always in the house. Then they always had like all kinds of music playing, like a random mix of ABBA and Elvis and Enya and that kind of thing. And then musical theatre stuff. And my older sister is an actress. So it was a creative house, definitely. Like random, eclectic. I like to say I grew up with soft people in a world full of hard edges. Like we all mind each other and we're all very close. So it was funny when I did wind up exploring autism because a lot of things resonated, and it made sense when those things did resonate about why I didn't pick up on them sooner, because there was never a feeling of being odd at home. We were all equally eccentric and creative and soft and kind of just a little bit left of center. So, yeah.
That's a beautiful turn of phrase. Soft people in a world of hard edges. That'd be a good album title. You can have it. It's your phrase. So college then, did you do the UL course that you applied for?
In the end, I did actually. After school, I took a year out and I went away working as one of those people you meet on the street who stop you and ask you to raise funds for charity. One of those people.
What are they called? Chuggers.
Yeah, charity muggers. Yeah. I was one of those for about 6 months after school. And I thought I was changing the world. You know, I really thought I was doing the best thing possible. But it was a real learning experience actually. And it taught me a lot ahead of like going into a career in music. It taught me a lot about people, about humanity, about how cruel people can be when, you know, you haven't provoked empathy in them. So, you know, you try and stop someone in Galway and they might be a perfectly nice person, but they see you as a scourge. The same way some people see panhandlers and people on the street begging or whatever, you know, there's a real disdain toward anyone asking for something on the street. So, I'd get a lot of really nasty remarks about my appearance and about my behavior and about what I was doing from people who didn't know me, all over the country. So I worked in different cities every 2 weeks and I was a team leader, and I had every few weeks a new person would come and join and I'd have to train them up. And we'd go out in the street from 7 o'clock in the morning until maybe 11 o'clock at night with a couple of breaks here and there. It was wild. It was crazy. We were, at one point, one of my managers advised us to go into the shop on Shop Street. I can't remember what it's called. McCambridge's maybe it's called, I think. And they're like, go in there now, get a double espresso, put 3 sugars into it, throw that back, and then get out in the street. And I was like 18, 19. And you go out in the street, buzzed up on caffeine and sugar, trying to stop people, trying to tell them about how awful the world was. And all of this was like, if you don't sign up 10 people today, you're not getting off the street. You're staying there until you get those 10 people to sign up. And people wind up frantic because you're like, I'm tired, I'm cold, I'm hungry, I need to go. So yeah, it was a crazy time. So I had 6 months of that, and then I moved to Galway for a while and worked in retail and in hospitality. And then eventually in the summer of that year, a few of my friends who I'd met when I was still in school, they were all in the Drama Society in UL, and they were doing a drama course over the summer. And I came back to Limerick and wound up hanging out with them and realized how much I missed having a gang of friends that weren't like workmates and that were all passionate about something and were creative. So I decided I'd start the course then. So I reapplied to go to UL and I started in the following September. So that was the start of 4 years of more madness, but it was good. It was really good.
That sounds like anything would have been enjoyable and easy after 12 hours in the streets of Galway trying to...
Yeah, it was kind of strange going into a group of people who were just fresh out of school and enthusiastic about humanity and life and stuff. And I'm coming in slightly world weary and haggard.
At 18. I'm done with the world. It's awful.
Pretty much. It was, I was fairly done with teamwork. That probably wasn't the best way to start my college career, but that was where I was at.
Probably wasn't a great example of what teamwork could be like either.
No,
Sounds highly irresponsible.
It was for sure. Thankfully, I wasn't the kind of manager my manager was. I tried my best to make sure everyone was safe and happy and had eaten properly before going out in the street and everything. But my God, it was brutal, and then you have your kind of big boss coming down to see you every now and then and to see how things are going. And they're like, why aren't you like pushing them a bit more? Why aren't you getting them to do this, that, and the other? And I'm like, because that is awful, is why I'm not doing that.
And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I think a lot of the public are aware that is the system with sugars. And
oh yeah, for
you're
sure.
trying to get people to sign up so you can get off the street, and people are like, well, I'm not supporting that nonsense. And
yeah,
the whole thing
absolutely.
goes round and round. Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus, yeah. Whenever I see them now, I mean, I always kind of give them a sympathetic smile or whatever, but I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't support the company you're working for. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah. I'm sure you probably passed me a few times on the street. I hope I was nice. So tell me about UL, because that sounds like an absolute cocoon compared to your time working.
Yeah, it was a totally different world. It was so I had spent some time in UL when I was in sixth year. My older sister was the head of drama soc, and at one point they needed a bit part in a play, someone to fill it, and I was roped in, and I just kind of fell in love with the whole scene and realized that people who are in college, I get on with them a lot better than people who are in school. Because, well, especially if you're in a club or society, because they're all people with shared interests and probably similar types of personalities. So yeah, I kind of latched onto them a little bit when I was still in school. And then when I came back, I became the president of the drama society and the production officer and stuff. So I had that kind of lovely outlet, which was great. And then the course itself, I mean, yeah, it was tricky. It was a hard course to do because it was very contemporary at the time. It had a real focus on sort of like we would do Morton Feldman and John Cage and all this kind of stuff that a lot of my classmates did not join a performing arts course to do. And then it was voice and dance. So even though some of us went in as singers or some of us went in as dancers, we were still encouraged to do both in first year. So I wound up having to do like ballet at the age of like 19, 20, which is very difficult. Like your bones are already formed, you're not bending that way anymore really at that age. So that was difficult. But
are there photos?
I don't think so.
I can imagine.
I really hope not. Like there are videos of our performances because we had to do like an end of year performance of everything. So there probably is like some dodgy photos or videos somewhere of me trying to do something. Hopefully they are hidden in the recesses of UL archives.
Did you feel a benefit from being pushed to do something creative and artistic that was uncomfortable?
Yeah, it was good. I think a lot of singers struggle with movement. A lot of dancers struggle with using their voice and vocalizing. So that was definitely beneficial. I probably would have preferred to be able to sort of explore the things I wanted to explore in depth rather than sort of. I think it's good for any creative person to do something new every now and then. But when it's every day for a year and it's not something you want to do, then that's kind of a bit harder. But that being said, I mean, it was just a year and it was beneficial. And I probably did develop a lot more comfort with my body, except for when the way sometimes you have tutors in college that are great at what they do, but don't really possess the social skills to communicate things properly with you. So at one point, one of the tutors commented on my body or physical appearance or something, and that kind of knocked me for quite a while. She also called me a loner, which was really nice. As someone who kind of likes to do their own thing and just sort of go off on their own at lunch, being called a loner by your tutor isn't the best thing. So there was those, and that was kind of more in the dance side of things. So yeah, I don't know. There's pros and cons to putting yourself out of your comfort zone. I'll always swear by it for teaching you new things and changing how you think about the world. But I think when you're being forced to do it and graded on it, it's a different kind of scenario,
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on that.
Yeah.
Humans, complicated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So was that a 4-year course?
4-year course, yeah.
What was the overall focus of it? Was it all on an artistic level, or was there any part of that kind of helping move you toward a career? Do you know what I mean? If you were doing, well, I mean, I don't know, does that count? If you went and trained to be a teacher, like at the end of it, you're qualified to be a teacher to go and, you know, sign a contract and start working.
Yeah, I know.
Did that exist in that creative world?
Yeah, in that course there was quite a good kind of an academic focus. So we learned kind of about funding applications, and there was quite an academic component to it as well. And there was a little bit of pedagogy too. So like in vocal theory class and Western choral, one of our assessments was where you had to actually lead a group and learn how to do that, which was really helpful. I will say, yeah, there wasn't huge focus on kind of career skills from it at the time. I believe the course has changed and evolved and actually has a different name now as well, which is great. It was primarily creative and a little bit directionless, and that I think a lot of my class probably struggled with. So most people now aren't working in creative area. Well, they are working in creative areas, but not working in kind of singing or dancing, which is what the course was about. I guess maybe the hope was that it would sort of produce, stars, musicians, dancers kind of thing. A lot of people are now teaching or working in various other fields, which is valid and great as well. I just don't know if it was everyone's intention or goal when they went into the course.
What was your intention and goal?
I don't know if I had one. I didn't think I was ever going to be a touring singer-songwriter. Like that wasn't a burning desire in me. I wanted to explore music and I wanted to see what direction it could take me. And I thought I might be an event manager or a festival coordinator. I loved bringing things together. And I became the booker for the on-campus bar scholars at a certain point. So I was like a musician in residence there, as well as booking acts to come in. So I learned how to set up the sound system and how to EQ and how to promote the gigs, all that kind of thing, which was great. So I thought that was maybe what I wanted to do. And then it wasn't until I finished my degree that actually gigging and touring became a possibility. So I started going out and looking for gigs. I did like an open mic night in town, but the course itself didn't really set me up for that, which was, I guess it's the case with most courses. You know, it's kind of who you meet while you're there and the opportunities you go seeking for yourself while you're on the course. I don't think I rarely go into things with an intention or a goal. I kind of have a history of just falling into stuff and seeing what happens.
Floating, that was the word I was going to use.
One of my friends refers to it as baby ducking. So like, you know, the way baby ducks just follow the next baby duck.
Okay.
Kind of.
It's like, I'm ducking babies. I was like, where's this going?
Get a basin, get a baby, duck the baby in the baby. Yeah.
Who's throwing babies at you that you have to duck? That sounds like a fun game.
Oh God, what an image.
Oh, so how long ago is that? Like between you finished college and now? What kind of years are we talking about?
Oh, you're making me feel very old now.
Hello, I don't think you were born when I went to college. Come on, we can do the age thing.
When was it? I graduated from that course when it was 2013, I guess I graduated. Took another couple of years off and went and had a look at what it was I wanted to do, did the kind of touring thing, released an EP, set up the Limerick Lady, which is my kind of, it started as a movement and now it's a podcast. So it was originally a movement because I was realizing in 2016 what a horrible disparity there was in gender in the industry. So I wanted to kind of platform that.
In the music industry?
In the music industry, yeah. So just looking at, like, not just in the gigging world, but also in radio, in various capacities, how you weren't seeing women up front doing things. So that's kind of where I sort of, 2016, I sort of started pursuing various avenues. So I kind of went down both lines. I went like festival booking and curating and also music at the same time. So 2016, and then it was actually one of my events that I ran. I booked Niamh Dunn to speak on. I booked a panel talk for International Women's Day in 2017, I think it was. Niamh came and she talked about her experience of touring solo and trying to promote her work and the shows she did that didn't get crowds and all this, like, you know, really vulnerable, open, beautiful stuff. And so after that, we kind of stayed in touch and we talked over and back quite a bit. And then an opportunity came up to tour in Germany. And she got in touch with me about it because she just felt, you know, I was the right fit and she liked my work ethic and she thought I would do well. So I got booked for this tour, the Irish Folk Festival tour that was going to happen in the end of 2017 it was going to happen. And so I said yes to it. And then the next thing I had to produce an album, which I didn't know was going to be a thing. I didn't have any intention of producing an album, but I went along to sign the contract for this tour. And the booker was like, so you'll have an album ready for the tour? I was like, are you asking? Are you telling me? What's happening here? So yeah, I wound up producing my first album completely by accident because I got booked for this tour in the course of those couple of years where I did the Limerick Lady, released a crowdfunded EP, started running all the Limerick Lady events, was touring the EP, and then began a master's in community music at UL as well. And while I was finishing my thesis, got this German tour and had to release an album. So it was a fairly hectic couple of years.
Where did the folk music come from?
That's a really good question.
This is the first time you've mentioned folk music. Before this, it's you know, a whole bunch of stuff, and musical theatre and dance and acting and suddenly folk.
I guess, you know, I was sort of exposed to it quite a bit, just from growing up in Ireland. My mum was really, really into Declan O'Rourke, so I'd have listened to him a ton growing up. But it didn't play a huge part in my life until quite late. Like, I sort of just fell in love with and adopted folk a little bit. So I'm not, in the truest sense, a folk musician. I incorporate folk nuance and the folk idiom into the work I create. But I mean, and my voice is what it is. You know, I don't think I've ever... I do a bit of everything. I do a bit of musical theatre. I do classical singing. I've done Latin American singing. I've done random postmodern weird stuff. But folk, my voice is my voice, and it is most often described as folk. I think that's why I fall into the folk bracket most often, because I don't put on an accent when I sing. And yeah, is that like a big part of folk? I don't know. Maybe it is.
I mean, I was smiling when you said folk, and I'm not a folk musician, and I'm a bit of a folk this, and I'm like, what is a folk musician? You know, there's traditional musicians at the Folk Awards, and it's, you know, that always brings up a little bit of conversation.
Absolutely it does, yeah, because it's a wildly different world. And really it should be the Trad and Folk Awards if it's going to be, or the Trad Folk Americana Awards, or the, you know, there's so much to it. I don't know why it isn't just the RTÉ Radio 1 Music Awards, but yeah, it's a curious one. Folk is such a highly contentious genre because you're looking as well at what constitutes folk in different cultures. When I go and travel in America, when I'm, you know, the first time I went over there for Milwaukee Irish Fest in 2019, I had a really great time, but I didn't know what I was, and nobody else knew what I was either. And then I was talking to various booking agents and stuff, and the kind of the feedback was, oh, you know, we're not sure what exactly she is. And I was like, well, she just is what she is. So it always causes confusion when trying to book shows in other countries, I think, where, you know, if I'm going to Germany or whatever, you know, what does she constitute? And then you have to put it down as just singer-songwriter, but it's like, what is that? You know, Ed Sheeran's a singer-songwriter, you know, it's where you're kind of forced to put yourself in a bit of a box and start writing to spec instead of just writing what you want to write. And it becomes complicated then, and you stop being yourself and you start being a genre. And how do you kind of dance the line between those things?
Is that magnified as a female singer-songwriter?
I think it could be all right, yeah, because it almost feels like, and it's not that there's, you know, that huge of a dearth of women in the genre. It's just, in terms of the ones that are visible, there's no overt pitting us against each other. It's not overt, ever, from what I can see these days. When I was coming up, anytime I played a show, someone would come up to me afterwards and say, oh, I saw another girl now playing here the other night, and you're way better than her. And it's like, what? why is that a thing you need to say? What? That's weird. That's a weird thing to say. Would you say it like what? That's bizarre. And so there was always this kind of like, it was bred into you to be jealous and competitive against other women in the industry. And so in folk, then it's like, oh, there's the queen of folk, oh, the princess of folk, the darling of folk. And it's like, what I don't really see that in lads as much, where one person is said to be the king of Irish folk or whatever. There seems to be this lovely strata of various people that all kind of work together and collaborate, but then among women it doesn't seem to kind of be marketed the same way, which is odd until now, where you're kind of seeing, you know, on the Late Late Show, you're seeing like 6 folk women put on one show together, and it's like, there they are now, they're all pals. Look at them all there now working together, and they're lovely, great friends, like sisters, I'd say there.
but you make an excellent point, which is that when that happens enough times, then it's normal, and then people don't have to go, oh look, there was 6 women on the Late Late Show, all playing folk.
Yeah. So it's an ongoing conversation, and it's ongoing. I know people get exhausted when this conversation comes up. I get exhausted. None of us want to still talk about the gender imbalance. It's not something, we don't have fun talking about it. Like, it either makes us angry or tired. But it has to still be talked about because it's still an issue. And, you know, people are still shocked when they see whatever. So I think what was really cool, there was a performance on the Late Late Show there last week of Sinead O'Connor's Mandinka, and you had Faye O'Rourke, Susan O'Neill, Niamh Farrell, I can't remember the other girls' names, but great lineup of singers. In the background, I'm fairly confident all the musicians were women as well. And now it wasn't spotlighted as clearly on camera, but it was very cool to see all the musicians were also women. And it's something that isn't kind of promoted as much in the kind of pop contemporary world. You see it a lot more in the kind of folk and trad worlds, where there's tons of outstanding women instrumentalists. But to just, I don't know. It is becoming more normal, but there's always going to be some fecker who's like, Jesus, more women now singing. Jeez, we really need this now.
Yeah, it is a case of it becoming normal. So how did that German tour go? Did you enjoy it?
I did. It was a bit of a baptism of fire. I'd never spent time on the road before internationally, and I'd never spent time among that many other musicians. So it was fascinating. And I during that tour, I learned so much professionally and musically about how you kind of keep the peace on the road for hours at a time, and how you connect with other people. Again, I hadn't experienced anything like it before. So the bonds you make with people. I was working with, so on the same tour, Socks in the Frying Pan were there. And so Aidan Coyne taught me to play dadgad tuning on the guitar. And that influenced my second album heavily. So most of the songs I wrote in the weeks following that tour were in open tuning, and I got a really good a lot of exposure to trad music over the course of those couple of weeks. So came away with kind of my brain felt a bit broken and rebuilt, which was really cool. It was broken, and then different things were kind of thrown into the mix and then rebuilt with those different things in there. So I was a different person afterwards in a really positive way. I really swear by destructive rebuilding of people, things, relationships. I think sometimes things have to break down to be rebuilt better. So, yeah.
This mightn't be a question as much as an observation, but you seem to be remarkably accomplished and remarkably
I do seem to be, don't I?
Understated, really, is the point I was trying to make. I mean, you just dropped in there halfway through the conversation. Oh, yeah, I was doing a master's in community music.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm, it's probably part of the ADHD is that I need to have a million things going on at a time and able to be able to do any one thing at a time. So I've gotten better lately at focusing on one thing at a time, but for quite a large tract of my life, it was important to me to have, and it was annoying actually, because it meant that I got this reputation as being like the busiest woman in music. And I don't think that's a healthy reputation to have. Like, I don't believe in hustle culture. I don't believe in being busy all the time, but I really prided myself on this kind of good girl behavior of always having something going on and always outwardly thriving and juggling a million things and somehow staying sane, which I wasn't realistically. You know, I was very much a veneer. But yeah, I got this reputation as being the busiest woman in folk. And I wasn't. Firstly, I wasn't. You know, there were lots of other people doing a million things as well, quietly. But because I'm quite a vocal person and talk about everything all the time, people following me were like, "Oh my God, you're so busy." So yeah, I have wound up being quite, I guess, accomplished and having a lot of stuff under my belt and that. But you know, I don't think it's the end of the world if you don't. It's quite cool when people have one thing that they've really, really focused on and gotten really, really good at. And I'm always very jealous of those people. It's the people as well who grew up learning an instrument or always knew what they wanted to be or do, and that's all they did. I just think that's the coolest thing in the world.
So you clearly feel deeply about a lot of things, and I think that comes out in a lot of the advocacy work that you do.
Yeah.
Is there a burden to that? And I ask that, having spoken to others that have become voices for certain movements, and they talk about how, you know, it is obviously fulfilling and it's important, but it can be exhausting and almost too much at times.
Yeah, I've had to be really careful in the past couple of years of what I say yes to. So I can't remember who it was I was listening to who recommended that you choose 2 causes, 3 causes a year that you stick to and you support. And it allows you to kind of lose a little bit of the guilt of saying no to things because you made a decision at the start of the year. These are my causes. These are the things that I'm really going to give everything to. And if I take on too many things, I can't give everything to these 3 things. So that was a good lesson to learn because I was saying yes to everything for a while. The burden comes when someone might come to you asking you to do the smallest, simplest thing. And it's just, can you make a video for this thing? Can you promote this thing? Can you share this thing? And it's not as if it's a massive thing to do. It's not a huge favor to ask of someone. But when you have 20 people all asking you to do it, is when it becomes difficult, because who do you say yes to and who do you say no to? And how do you justify saying no when you do say no? Because there's no actual real reason why you can't do this thing. It's just, well, I mean, I'm sorry, but, you know, I'd love to, but it's just, you know, these other 10 people have also asked me to do it. And they're like, well, why don't you do that too then? It's like, because I also need to eat and go for a walk and have a bit of headspace. And I'd like to read a book, actually. And then I need to write this thing and I've got a commission I have to do. And it winds up becoming really heavy because you want to give everything to everyone else, especially when you're as lucky as we are to be doing what we do. Like it's a phenomenal career to be in, and it's an incredible industry to be in, and we really are very lucky to have the platform we have. And so I've always wanted to give back and to platform others because I do feel that lucky. I feel really privileged. But yeah, it becomes very heavy after a point. It's not that doing the things is difficult. It's not that doing the things is heavy. It's the constant asking, the constant feeling of eyes on you, like, oh, could you please? And it's like, oh, I really want to. Like,
would you be okay if you didn't have a cause? Would you be okay if you didn't have a cause?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, you know, I'd love for everything in the world to be great. If everything in the world was great and everything was working and everyone was happy and fed and had homes, I'd be delighted. It's not that I needed to survive myself. I don't think I'd be myself if I didn't care about the stuff that's going on out there. Now I do, you know, God, there's been some nights now I do get a bit kind of overwrought with it sometimes, where there'll be a night out when I'll see some lad who's experiencing homelessness and I've had a few too many drinks and I just get completely overwhelmed by how much I can't help every single person in the world, and I wind up bawling and being bundled into a taxi because I'm like, no, I just want to give them all of my money, and like, can we just, we don't get the taxi, we just give them the taxi and then I give them all the money for somewhere to sleep. And you know, people are like, Emma, if you do this every single night, you're going to have no money. And Yeah, it's one of those kind of things. It does become one of those things, or it did for a while. I've learned to sort of temper it a bit, but I don't know, you wind up, if you temper it, there's the fear that you get kind of numb to stuff as well. And I'd hate that. I'd like to be as open as possible. It all becomes a bit overwhelming, you know?
I think my favorite phrase that I learned from Anthony de Mello, he was a Jesuit priest and a real rebel. He was thrown out of the Jesuits and excommunicated and all sorts. You know, he was way ahead of his time.
Jeekers, what does it take to be excommunicated from the Jesuits?
I think he talked about all sorts of stuff. He was fantastic and had a wonderful sense of humor. I'm pretty sure he talked about advocacy and being angry about things, and somebody asked him about it in a talk. It's one of the only talks, I think, where there was some really grainy video. And he said, I can't remember who he quoted, but he said, "Jump into the din of battle, but leave your heart at the lotus feet of the Lord," which was fantastic. And it was the idea of like, take action, jump in.
Yeah.
But don't let your emotions get the better of you, or to get so emotionally involved. And it was somebody who had asked him a question about, you know, do you not get really angry and upset when you see a homeless person? And his thing was, well, yes. And if I did, what would that do to them? They're still homeless and hungry. Absolutely, and I'm angry, you know. I just thought that was a very helpful phrase for me.
Yeah, it's that thing of not making it about you, I suppose, not centering yourself in these things. And like, you know, after you've had a few drinks, ego starts to win quite a bit. But yeah, with any of these things, if you allow yourself to get overwrought with emotion and stuff in front of someone, all it does is make your emotions their problem. All of a sudden, they have to comfort you. This person who's living on the streets in the cold, has nothing to eat. Suddenly, that's somehow a you problem. That's ridiculous. So yeah, it is important. I mean, I get emotional and stuff in the quiet of my own space. I wouldn't do it in front of someone who's genuinely struggling. But that is a really good, yeah. I mean, anger has a purpose. I think anger is a very, very valuable and powerful emotion to experience if it is motivating and if it is something that moves you to act. But outside of that, you know, any strong emotions like that don't actually serve the thing that you're angry or emotional about. And so you do have to kind of be careful with that. Again, it's about moderation. You know, if you're tempering yourself all the time, then are you ever feeling anything? And as an artist, how helpful is that? But yeah, it's about finding balance.
You've spoken a lot about anxiety in your own personal journey with anxiety. Is there a question at the end of that, Enda? How are you doing?
How are you now? Have you cried lately?
Did you get your cold swim in?
All right, Tuberty.
Is that an ongoing? Is it an ongoing journey? I think that's the question.
I struggle with it from time to time, but I've learned to I think pinpoint it a bit better. I've learned now that actually what I kind of had put down to anxiety is actually part of the autistic experience. So overwhelm and not recognizing social cues, sensory overload, struggling with mess, struggling with disorder, all this kind of stuff, changes in schedule and routine, sudden changes of plan with people, all of that stuff, things that I would have previously thought was an anxiety attack or an experience of anxiety, I think is actually just part of the way I'm wired as an autistic person. So learning to kind of frame it as that has helped a lot, because I can kind of, it's not that I can rationalize it or change how I feel about it, but it means what I'm experiencing, this kind of psychosomatic experience, has logic to it. And there is something in what just happened that has triggered this response in me. And I can kind of step back from it a bit more now. I've also learned to make accommodations for myself a lot more. So in 2019, when I went to Milwaukee, I really struggled with anxiety to the point that when I went and did the rock show at the end of the festival, that for anyone listening who hasn't been, you have to go. But secondly, the rock show is this massive gathering of musicians on stage, all singing songs and kind of paying tribute to an artist or a genre or something. So 2019, I was on stage with you guys and with Hermitage Green, and we did Cranberries medley, and I had never been in front of a crowd that size before. My in-ear monitors weren't working. I didn't fully understand what the structure of the song was going to be. I had had a long day. I was wearing a dress that was like the sensory experience of the dress I was in, the shoes I was in was just completely off, and I felt totally uncomfortable in my own skin. And I just broke. I just shut down entirely. I came off stage and geez, the poor lads from Hermitage Green, they were trying to pay me a compliment and be nice to me. I'm pretty sure I snapped at them and just walked away. Like I felt like an absolute prick. Like but I'm looking back now and I recognize what actually happened and what the combination of things were that put me into that position. And also, I had been there for the full festival on my own, and I didn't really know anyone. I didn't understand how to communicate with people. I didn't understand what the social dynamics were, or how anything worked. So this year, or last year rather, going back to Milwaukee, I understood the lay of the land and how the hotel worked and how the festival worked and who you needed to talk to and how rehearsals happened and all that kind of thing. And I was much more comfortable in my own skin. And I think that probably was pretty obvious. But, you know, when I talk about 2019, I always talk about how I was experiencing low level anxiety all weekend. And now I know I was just in total sensory overload, complete overwhelm. And I wasn't making accommodations for myself. This year, I brought Alec over with me on cello. He was with me the whole time. He's someone who thinks very like I do. He understands when I need space and when I need company, and the two of us really helped each other out. And I was able to make that little accommodation for myself, and I budgeted for that, and it was a total game changer. So I think getting that identification as autistic really helped me to know what I needed to do for myself to be able to survive in this industry. If I had kept going the way I was going without an identification, I'd have wound up on anti-anxiety medication that wouldn't have worked, and I'd have given up. So yeah, it's some, you know, and to a degree it is an anxiety experience. It's very similar, but I tried therapy for it, and my counselor told me to try and just be in the moment, which as a neurodivergent person is the worst possible thing you can tell someone. So learning that was really helpful.
That was a remarkable answer. And that whole last piece, if I can say so, having a deep and very personal connection to what you're talking about, I know that people that would really, really benefit from everything that you said in that last 4 or 5 minutes. It's a wonderful explanation of how it all works.
Yeah.
Yeah. First time I did Milwaukee was 2012. And on the Sunday night after it was all over, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm in the fetal position on the floor of the hotel on the phone to my wife. And I couldn't stop shaking because I had burnt, as you described, I had burnt through every ounce of anything that I could possibly reserve for myself.
Yeah.
And not knowing, you know, that you only have 100 pennies to spend every day and you got to keep some for yourself.
Oh, this is it. Absolutely. Yeah. I love the use of pennies or the use of spoons. There's different things you can use to describe the amount you have to give to people on a given day or to give to activities. And it's something that I think people look at musicians and people who perform and assume we have boundless pennies. We just keep on spending all day long, all night long. It's all fine. Mm. And I remember playing a festival in Ireland a few years ago and kind of saying, you know, it's really noisy and there's a lot of people and I'm really struggling. And another musician saying, you're in the wrong industry. And kind of feeling like it was both quite a hurtful moment, but also a really helpful moment, because I was at a point where I was able to kind of go, no, I'm not. And we need to stop assuming that all of us as creatives, as performers, as musicians are all fine all the time and can deal with all of this all the time. It takes all kinds to make this industry work and to be in this kind of career. And actually, you know, originally artists were the shy, retiring, like people that couldn't cope socially. We weren't necessarily as reflective, introspective people designed for all the rest of the stuff and all the socializing and the mingling and all of that. So there's room for everyone in this industry. And it really bothers me, this idea that we should all be able to come off stage and go straight into the crowd and talk to everyone and mingle and network and make the connections and then get up and do it again the next day, when, God, the amount of times I've had what I now know are autistic hangovers, basically, where you've had like 3 days of that non-stop and nobody around you is willing to give you the space or time to be on your own. And then you just go and sit on your own for a week because you're totally burnt out. It's that exact thing. Yeah, you're like, you have to be on the ground and you have to talk to someone who is grounding, and it's good to know what your accommodations need to be. It's horrible to have to learn it the hard way like that.
Yeah, beautiful. What's next for Emma Langford?
Funnily enough, I'm going to America. I'm heading to Folk Alliance at the end of this month for a week. Folk Alliance in Kansas City. So I'll be straight into the madness for a full week. But I have my band with me. So I've got my keys player, I've got Alec, and I've got a drummer over there who's going to work with us. So that'll be fun. It's for folks listening, it's one of the biggest industry events in the world, and a really great chance to showcase what you do to bookers, promoters, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully I'll meet some cool people there. And then I've just a handful of Irish gigs. I'm kind of keeping it quiet this year in Ireland. That's the plan anyway. A couple of gigs and a couple of festivals. And then Germany for 3 weeks, April, May, and maybe back to America in wintertime. I've got a couple of inquiries for kind of October, November time for this year. So that's the intention. And sure, look, if I get anything else, it'll all be on my website, I guess.
That was my next question. Where can people find you?
Everywhere. I'm omnipresent and I am inevitable. I'm on most social media platforms. I think I'm on all of them. I don't know if there's one I'm not on. So if you look for Emma Langford Music, most places you'll find me. And then my website's emmalangfordmusic.com, and that has kind of my news, my press, my pictures, my music, gigs, all that kind of thing. So it's the handiest place to go for everything.
Have you figured out how to use TikTok yet?
I'm on it. I have, I think, 6 videos up. They're really bad and have nearly no views on them whatsoever. I have discovered my niche though. So I do a mean trumpet impression, and I've discovered there's this guy called Sheridan who does videos where you have to duet with him. He plays piano and does like little harmonies and stuff. So I'm finding the people that have duetted with him, and then I'm layering a trumpet solo on top of that, and it's really fun. So I think that might be my niche.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Emma, thank you. This has been a beautiful conversation.
Thank you so much. Likewise.